Now that I'm back in the events business, I wanted to hear how someone who's built their conference network into a 300 plus global event enterprise got started. What could we learn from them about starting a conference? Dan Taylor founded appsevents, a conference series that teaches Google's G Suite apps to students and teachers. How he got there is interesting, but it's his advice for anyone looking to start a conference, minimize expenses, and maximize revenues that really make this episode one to save. If you're thinking of launching your own conference, seminar, mastermind, or even an online class, get ready to take notes. There's a ton of valuable information in here. Now, please welcome Dan Taylor.
Welcome to the Build Cycle, the podcast by Tyler Benedict that explores the startup stories and growth tactics of hundreds of entrepreneurs, plus his own tips and tricks learned over 2 decades of launching, running, and growing businesses, including BikeRumor.com, the world's largest and most popular cycling tech blog. If you're thinking of starting your own business, the Build Cycle will give you the tools and inspiration to do it right. Now, let's dive into this episode of The Build Cycle.
Hey Dan, thanks a ton for coming on the Build Cycle podcast.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Right on. So you started a few different events, and judging from your LinkedIn timeline, it looks like a couple of them were started very close to each other. But you started one called Course Director and then Events Frame, and you've since sold both of those companies. So before we dive into the main topic, I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about those real quick, like what kind of businesses they were and how you got started with those.
Yeah, so both those companies are SaaS products, which I founded. I mean, I came up with the idea in both cases, and then I got a couple of partners on board in both cases. I don't want to say I'm any kind of SaaS guru because both of those products kind of got to kind of okay monthly income, and then we sold them for, good money, but not crazy money. So, I think I've got fairly average success as a SaaS founder. I'm good at starting things, and I'm good at managing to sell them, but I've never really done it in a big way,
Yeah, the growing part is hard. It's a different skill set, I think, than the startup skill set.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're two different things. So the first one, Course Director, that's a product that was in the Google Apps Marketplace, as it was then called, and it was for schools. And it integrated with Google Apps, now G Suite, and allowed schools to create classrooms. And when students submitted work, it went into Google Drive and stuff and created folder structure automatically. And that was, so I started, my current business about 2011, and we just developed that product because we had a bunch of schools ask, I was kind of doing support contracts for school and some training and different things to connect it to Google. And schools kept asking for the same thing. We said we wanted a way to create this learning management system. So we just went and built it, I got together with 2 guys I knew. We built it. It was all very quick, from founding that company to selling it was less than a year. And, we got some decent customers. We had Rutgers University, still use it in the US. We had Eton College. It's a very famous school in England where the royal family go. We had some big name customers. We just never really sort of jumped it to the next level, and we got an offer to buy it. So we just sold it. Nice.
And what about Events Frame?
Yeah, Events Frame. Well, again, it was sort of, came from like scratching itch. So we'll talk about it, I'm sure. But I have a company. We run a lot of events. We run over 300 events a year. And we used Eventbrite. We paid a lot of money for Eventbrite and then looked at some different solutions, Events Case, Bizaboo, a few other ones, which didn't work out for us. So then I was like, why don't we just build our own system, And there's a guy, Simon Payne, who was one of the co-founders of Lead Pages, which you may know. And Simon's someone I know in Prague. And so we started working together on it. We got another guy, James, involved. James Seho, who worked with appsevents, who emailed you. And we built it, built it for ourselves, and then obviously with in mind that we could other companies would use it because anyone who runs any event can use the system. And again, we grew it. We did an AppSumo launch. I don't know if you're familiar with AppSumo.
Oh yeah,
it's a daily deal. Yeah, like a daily deal for software website, and you sell your software for a fixed lifetime fee. We did that, got some money, and then we got a bunch of subscribers. And again, we got an offer to buy the company really recently. I mean, it's literally going through as we speak. I mean, we've exchanged the contracts, and we're just transferring all the accounts over. Like, right, it's like a live thing right now. But basically, the reason for me for selling this was really like I realized I found it really hard to run two businesses, and maybe if I had was a better manager, or I had some more structure in place, but it was just tough. I've got my main business, which is doing well, it's growing. And this was a distraction. It's making money. It's a great company, and I'm really kind of torn whether we should have sold it or not. But I just found it hard. Like, I've got one business and running two, it wasn't for me.
Yeah, it is hard to focus. I mean, I've got Bike Rumors, the main thing, and then what you and I are going to talk about a little bit is the events, because I've started a event and have run some in the past, and it's you really have to try very hard to not let one become a distraction from the other, and give each enough focus that they can both thrive and grow and succeed.
And you know what? I think it's easier. I think I would do it again if both businesses had the same or similar kind of target audience. The problem with this is appsevents, my main business, our focus is teachers and people that work for international schools. And then with the software, Events Frame, it was anyone who runs an event. It wasn't education focused. It was completely, I couldn't use my current list. I couldn't use our current marketing channels. Couldn't even use us, any of our social media pages. It was all just a completely new approach, and we never figured it out properly. I think if you've got a similar audience, it makes things easier, at least for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's the target audience for my event is also a lot of the people I talk to for Bike Room, or the brand managers and stuff. So, but yeah, reaching, like, those are the easy people to reach. It's everybody else that I want to get into my event is. I'm still trying to figure that out. Is one of the things I want to ask you later on, is how you get the audience. So let's pause on that for a second.
Of course.
My next question was, why did you sell them? But you just answered that. So you also, appsevents is the big one, and like you said, runs kind of Google Suite education and certification programs globally. So originally I was thinking I'd ask what made you want to transition from SaaS to that, but you kind of started, it looks like to me, appsevents concurrently with Events Frame, and ran those for quite a few years. I think they both started around 2012, 2013, right?
Yeah, like exactly, 2011, 2012. Yeah, well, it was Course Director, not Events Frame originally. So, yeah, I mean, what happened was I co-founded a recruitment agency based here in Prague with a good friend of mine, and then I ended up selling my share in the recruitment agency to the lady, Hannah Harris, who's now the manager of the company. Actually, she sort of bought out my share, and that's a whole different story. I was just, it was a great experience starting a business, but I hated recruitment, and I couldn't get out of it quickly enough. So I managed to sell my share in that company. And a guy, I used to be a contractor, IT contractor before the recruitment agency, and a guy who was my boss then had gone to work for Google, and he was like, Dan, take a look at Google. It's a lot of really interesting stuff. They've got Google Apps. It's an amazing system. I don't know if you use Google Apps, but I've used it for a long time. Yeah, I mean, everyone does it. It's kind of a default, for entrepreneurs. And he'd gone to work for Google, and he was like, by the way, it's free for schools and universities, so it's got a huge potential. So I was wanting to get back into something technical after my sort of foray into recruitment, and so I got into it, and I figured out, I wasn't sure what the business was, but I knew there was a lot of interest there. So I started doing I was doing everything, just throwing things at the wall to see what stuck really. But most of the kind of consulting stuff, I'd set people up on Google Apps. I'd do migrations, for schools. I got a bunch of support contracts. I got, which is what led to doing Course Director. So I got all this work, and then, funnily enough, I went to attend a Google for Education conference in the US. Back at this time, there had been no events in Europe at all. So I went to attend this conference in America, and I was like, why don't I just run one of these in Europe? So I contacted Google. There was no partner program for education back then, and my friend obviously was working at Google. He introduced me to someone on the education team. And I was like, can I run a Google event in Europe? And they were like, yeah, I guess so. They didn't say yes, but they didn't say no, So I kind of sort of had approval, and I went and did it. And I actually didn't think I was going to make any money out of it. I did it initially to promote the software, which we'd now developed, and just to promote my kind of consulting venture, of like helping schools out with Google. And it's funny because I was on a call with Google, and I started selling tickets, and I'd made, I don't know how much money by that point, maybe $20,000 or something, people were buying tickets. And I was just about to ask Google, like, who do I pay this money to, When someone on the call made some comment like, oh, glad to see you're making some money out of this, Dan. And I was like, first of all, I'm glad I kept my mouth shut, because I almost ended up like not making any money. But actually, they were fine about it. So I was like, oh, actually. So, I ran this event in Prague. It was the first ever, it was the European Google for Education Summit. Huge interest. Like if you run anything that's new, you get a lot of interest. So, I had people come from all across Europe. And I ended up making quite a bit of money out of it. But more importantly, I really enjoyed it. Like I met people, so many. I mean, that first event, the contacts I've got now, still people I'm friends with from that event, there's a lot. And so, I was actually thinking, why don't I just run more of these events? It's more profitable than the rest of the business, more profitable than the software. And I just kept doing more. A guy turned up from that event who was from Bangkok. He said, why don't we do one in Bangkok? Really interesting character, a guy called Wayne. And he was at the American School in Bangkok. And I'd never met the guy. He just turned up for the conference. And he was like, look, let's do a conference in Bangkok in a few months. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, can I just take all the signs and everything to Bangkok? And I was like, this guy I've never met before. And literally, I took him to the airport. I loaded him up with all the signs, everything. And I'm like, am I ever going to see this guy again? Has he just taken all my stuff? And we ran an event in Bangkok. That was my number 2.
Nice. I've got a quick question on that then. What's the language issues? Like, do you run everything in English?
Yeah, good point. We have done up until this point almost everything in English, but it's starting to change now because now we're an official Google partner. We're doing a lot of stuff all around the world. So there's more and more requirement for local language. So we do a Taiwan summit and we have some Chinese sessions, like a separate strand of the event is Chinese. We've done stuff in all the Scandinavian languages, Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, Danish, a few things in German. So yeah, we're doing more and more. The thing that slowed me down on that was more just having a good network of trainers and presenters in local languages that I knew were going to be amazing. That was kind of what slowed me down. But yeah, it's coming, and then we're doing more and more of it.
Right on. Did you run?
Probably for like 7 years. Sorry, for like 7 years it was only English, like nothing else.
Yeah. Did that cause any problems? Like, did you ever get to an event, like say, I mean, you're in Prague, right? Like, I guess some people speak English there, obviously, a lot of expats there for sure. But, there or Bangkok or wherever, and have to like slow down the pace a little bit? Like, how did you deal with it in an area where English was a second language, if, and maybe not even super prominent or prevalent?
I think because we advertised the event as being in English and everything, all the promotion, everything, it was clear it was all in English. I think people tended to only come if they had good English. Okay. I mean, we do different types of events. Some of them are small. Google has a bunch of certifications for teachers. We run these boot camps, and if the class is really struggling with English or just at a lower level, sometimes they're just more entry level people, that then people have to slow it down. That's what being a good presenter is about, being able to on the fly switch what you're talking about, depending on the group.
Yeah. Are you more on the back end of your events, or are you also a presenter?
I'm more at the back end now. I'm trying to be more at the back end, honestly, because I think now I've got a good enough team that they run it much better without me. Google's got a program. I highly recommend anyone who's interested in Google stuff become a Google certified trainer. It takes a while, but I was the first one actually in mainland Europe to become a certified trainer back in 2013 or 14. I think I did it, maybe 12. And to do that, you've got to do 12 training sessions a year to kind of recertify, which is great. So it makes me go and do at least 12 sessions a year. Sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 at one summit. But I do it because of that, I've often thought, should I go down the route of keynoting? I've actually been asked to speak at a conference in China, someone else's conference this year, and I had a couple of requests last year, and I didn't do it. But I've kind of stuck away from it. But now I'm thinking maybe I will start and going to keynote at a few events. I think it could be, or not always keynote, but just present at other events. I think could be a good way. But honestly, right now I'm trying to get myself out of it. Apart from my 12 official Google ones I need to do, I've kind of stayed out of it more or less.
All right. Well, I imagine at 300 events, there's no way you can present at every single one of those. So I wanted to just real quick to help put some of my next questions into reference for people who don't know me that well. I actually have a little bit of a background in events. I've run 24-hour mountain bike races in the past before selling that off to some friends that ended up growing it way bigger. And I've helped others develop the curriculum for some of their events. And now I've started my own content marketing conference called Peak Content Summit. So I'm familiar with running like a single event, but your network of events is now global and huge, which to me just seems daunting. But I know it didn't start out that way. Like, how quickly did you grow from that first one in Europe and then Bangkok, and then like how quick did it grow to this volume of events?
Yeah, so we did. I should check the list, but we did 2 in the first year, Prague and Bangkok. Then we did about 8 or 9 the second year, and then probably 40. It grew big, and then probably we probably grew up like 20 or 30 extra a year, 60, 80, like that, till it's over 300. But we don't run that many big events. We run a lot of small events. So we run the summits, which are like conferences, which have anywhere between 80 and 300 people typically, and we'll do maybe 20 of those events, and then we'll do a lot of events, kind of certification events, which will have anywhere from sort of 20 to they could be 60. We could run 2 or 3 rooms, or it could be 80 even. But a lot of these kind of smaller events. But what's interesting is what you said. Everyone thinks it's daunting to run a lot of events, but it gets easier and easier the more you run, because you get processes in place. Like if you run one event and that's not your main business, like it takes up half your year. It literally is just it's the hardest thing ever. But if you run 10 events, then I can talk about it, but I've got a team in Cebu in the Philippines who manage all the inquiries from attendees. They manage all the websites, they manage all the social media, all the marketing. And then we've got regional directors in every region of the world who run it on profit share. So, if you start to structure a business around it, and it's not just a side hustle, then it becomes easier. Do you know what I mean? Because that using the same marketing process more or less for every event, you have to tweak how you're doing your social media advertising and your social media promotion and your newsletter and everything. But it's a process.
Let's talk event management. I definitely have a lot of questions, but I wanted to know, where do you start? What's the first thing you're looking at when adding a new event?
There's a few things. I mean, first of all, you've got to be sure. There's 3 things. Is it a good location? Is it good dates? And is there interest in it from the audience? You know what I mean? Which they're 3 big questions, maybe more, but they're the 3 main ones. So because you can have, and they've all got to be right. Because you can have a great event, right? But if it's like the same weekend as a conference all your audience are going to go to, or it's like the middle of a school holiday when everyone with kids is away, or you know what I mean, name the reason, you can have the best event and no one's going to come, or conversely, if you've got like really good dates, but maybe you've just angled it wrong, maybe you've gone for lower level people in a certain profession and it's higher level people, then they're not going to come, So it's kind of getting those 3 things lined up, which is that's where you start, And I always try to, I'm a bit different because I host my events at schools, so I do them in partnership with a school. I get the school to guarantee to send some attendees, so I kind of know that. Or most of my events actually, I've done other ones like I partnered on MicroConf and some other things which were different, but generally speaking, I work with schools, So I kind of figure out that, but it at least works for them. They've got a bunch of teachers that want to come. They like the dates and they like the content. But those 3 things are what you've got to focus on.
Yeah. How do you target the right people? I mean, I guess with schools it's sort of easy, but surely there's got to be some lessons in there for other people running other events.
It's the thing about events is there's 2 types of people, I guess, running an event. Number 1 is if you've already got an audience, and number 2 is if you don't. If you already have an audience, it's infinitely easier to run an event, because you're just targeting. They know you already, you're just targeting your event at your existing audience. If you don't have an audience, then as a first-time event runner, it's hard. When you run year 2, year 3 of the same event, it's great. You'll try to get a bunch of returning people. You make sure everyone has an amazing time, and I can tell you how to do that. Then people will come back. But I'm not going to lie to you and your audience. If it's a first-time event and you don't have an existing audience from your business or from a podcast or from a blog or from whatever way, it's really hard. You've got to hustle, And I think the reality is that, you've got to do everything. You've got to do social media promotion on everything, LinkedIn, Facebook, maybe Twitter. You've got to do paid advertising, but you've got to. It's old school hustling. I think when on my podcast, the events podcast, I've talked to a bunch of people who run conferences, and it's a lot of it's old school hustle. It's finding people on LinkedIn, contacting them, cold contact or email, cold calling people, chasing people. I think someone described it as taking massive action. One of the guys I interviewed, like, you've just got to take huge action. If it's a first time event and you don't have a big audience, you've just got to hustle, and it means doing the thing that everyone's terrified of now, is like calling people up
right.
and chasing them down, and that's just what you got to do.
Yeah, it's funny because that's actually what I have found to be most successful so far in generating like legitimate interest in mine and getting people to sign up. It's just I've been using LinkedIn a ton, reaching out to people and conversing and like posting what I think is helpful information. It seems to be getting a good response, but like using that to generate interest and get real dialogue going about it, versus I've tried a couple of small paid campaigns on Facebook and Twitter, and I think I even did one on LinkedIn, and they generated like literally zero. And so now I'm kind of curious, like, what, as far as paid tactics go, what have you done that's worked?
Well, I mean, one thing one tip that I use is I do a lot of LinkedIn outreach, and again, I'm touch wood, like I'm kind of lucky in a sense that I'm not doing most of this myself now. We can talk about the team, but I have a team in place. But I do a lot of LinkedIn outreach, and I actually have one of my team in the Philippines. Part of his job, so your LinkedIn, you've got Sales Navigator. You can subscribe to Sales Navigator, which allows you to better target people. I think it's $500 or $600 a year. It's great. So I give him access to my LinkedIn account, and and I do some search filters on people I think are interested for our events. He issues contact requests as me, starts a dialogue with people, and then so he does the maximum. You can do about 100 a day realistically, I think. And you've got to change the numbers, but I hope no one from LinkedIn listens to this podcast. I might be getting banned. Basically, he does it, and then I jump in if there's any interest. So because of that, every day, like 6 days a week or 5 days a week, there's 100 requests going out to people. He's starting a dialogue. He knows how to follow up on some basic stuff, but as soon as it gets interesting, I jump in, and this is to get sponsors and stuff. So that's one tip I'd do is like, you could hire someone part-time, and if anyone wants help with them, I'm happy to help them with how to do this, and start this whole LinkedIn thing. And I'd say, let's say this costs you, $300 a month or $500 a month or whatever, maybe less. I'd say it's better spending the time on this, getting a person to help you do this than to buy the ads,
Yeah, it's especially for that amount of money. I may follow up to you later on how to do exactly that. And you're not the first person to recommend people in the Philippines. It seems like there's a really good workforce there that's being underutilized.
Yeah, I've had a team in Cebu since my first employee, full-time team member was Cebu. And actually, you mentioned before the interview about Chris Ducker, who I interviewed on my podcast, and Chris Ducker has a company called, one of his ventures called Virtual Staff Finder. And I found my first team member through him. And Chris used to have a co-working space in Cebu, which is the second biggest city in the Philippines. So I actually, back then, I hired someone and I went out to meet him. I went up there for 2 weeks, had a really cool time. We worked together in his co-working space, got him up to speed. They actually left like shortly after, but fortunately I'd hired my second person then, and then I've now got 4 people there, and I've kind of hired them all myself, or through my current team. So I've had a team there now for 8 years, and that's kind of a backbone of my operation is these 4 guys in Cebu, and I want to grow it in the future definitely. Nice.
Okay, so like any business events, there's revenues and expenses. Let's start with the latter. Yep. What are the main expenses in running an event?
Venue, speakers, and advertising costs are the three. So you've got to try to minimize all of them. If it's a first or second time event, you can usually get people to speak for free. You'd be amazed how many people you can get to speak for free. My first maybe 2 events, maybe even 3, I didn't pay anyone anything. I was just, I needed the money. It's my only source of income, and I was honest about it to people. And I got people to speak for free. I still do get a lot of people speaking for free. A lot of people just want the exposure, You obviously can't let them pitch anything because that ruins the message. But as we've grown and grown, Now we hire a lot more speakers, so we end up paying for speakers for sure. That's one expense. The venue is the big one. That's what can kill you. If you pick a hotel, typically you have to pay a third up front, like a month before, usually a third at the time of the event, and a third after it. It depends. If you run events in the US, like you probably know this, but the US is crazy. Like a lot of the events are kind of union control. They charge you for every little thing. The bills get a bit crazy. So keeping an eye on the costs is a big thing. And anything you can do to get a free or a cheap event, if you can run it at a co-working space or a church hall or a school or anything like that, you've got to be careful, because if it's kind of a high ticket event, people want a nice environment. But that's the second biggest cost, and always look to mitigate it. A lot of hotels will do a deal where, like, if you can get your attendees to stay at the room, they'll give you like 10% or even I've negotiated even 20% of the hotel room rate back to you. So for example, typically hotels will have, they call it a DDR, a delegate day rate. So let's say it's $50 per person per day, so $100 for a 2-day event. And you have 100 people, so it's like a $10,000 cost for the venue. But you can negotiate the hotel. But if all these people stay there and they spend $400 per person on the hotel, which means you get 20% back, you could make back a lot of that by doing a good negotiation with the hotel.
Yeah, one of the ones, probably the hotel I'm looking at, they've offered basically a pretty good room rate. I'm happy with that. The conference room that they offered it free with a pretty sizable food and beverage. I think it's like $3,000, I think. And I was thinking, okay, well, that's there's no cost. I was going to provide lunch for the attendees during the day anyway. Like, that's not bad. But then what really kind of turns me off of that is you look at the lunch options, and it's like, okay, we can do a box lunch for like $20 a head, or if you want like buffet style, it'd be like $25 to $30 a head. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, we could literally walk 2 doors down to your restaurant and feed everybody for like $15 a head. Like, I don't understand the economics here, and I think it's just their way of padding it to recoup the cost. But
yeah, I mean, look, they want to make, let's pick out a number, like they want to get $50 a person out of you. They can do it in one way or another way. They can do it on the hiring you the room, or they can make it look good by saying the room is free and you pay for the food. But you're still going to pay it.
Yeah,
they're going to get you one way or the other. But everything's negotiable. I mean, is this in the US?
Yes.
Yeah, which is the worst, as you know. Like, it's remember, everything's negotiable. Like, get a deal from one hotel, go and talk to another hotel. Then you can come back and say, look, I got this deal. And maybe you'll get a better one. You can negotiate absolutely everything. If they need the business, they'll be more keen. I mean, people get free hotels and discounted food sometimes as well. It all depends on, it's all supply and demand.
Yeah. Fortunately, it's kind of like a low season time in Nashville when I'm doing it, so I'm getting, I think, pretty good rates. But yeah, I agree. It's like, if you don't ask, then you'll never know, and I always ask.
To be honest, that sounds pretty good. I mean, if you're getting a free, you're getting a free room and all the AV support, and you're only paying $20 or $30 a person a day, I mean, that's a good price.
All right. Okay. Good to know. Any surprise expenses that people don't realize, or like after the fact they're like, ooh, crap?
I mean, because I was kind of useless when I started this. Sometimes I wouldn't agree everything. I'd get speakers who suddenly, I'd agree a fee, and they'd suddenly send me an invoice for all these, like their taxi transfer and their SIM card and all this other crap, and I'd be like, no, we didn't agree that, because I wasn't like, now I'm super concrete at everything. It's anyone I pay is a fixed fee. And that's it. It's everything. If you have to buy another flight because you miss your flight, that's on you. If you have to, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really nail things down with my speakers. And some people, you sort of lose a bit of faith in human nature sometimes. They can be a bit cheeky. And it's really short-sighted, because you never want to work with these people again once they try to hustle you like this. But, it happens. So that was kind of my only surprise expense. Everything else, what I love about events as a business model is, you run your event. I do a P&L. I've just got a big spread. It's very old school, but I've got a big spreadsheet with a tab for every event, and we track everything. And you pretty much know at the end of it, this is what you pay, this is what's coming in. and you move on to the next event. It's over. You close it off. You've made your money, and you're on to the next one. Sometimes you lose money. I mean, when you run as many events as we do, sometimes you make money, sometimes you don't. Obviously, on average, you do. But I'm at the situation now when some events I know I'm not going to make any money out of, but it's still worth me doing it because I'll get to reach a lot of people. We get to people have an amazing time. They'll recommend this to someone else, and have a great experience, and we'll run events. So, for me, I'm in a weird situation that we don't always make money out of our events, but I never cancel them. And that's a big tip I'm going to give you and your listeners is never cancel an event. Once you do that, you annoy people. People won't trust you're ever going to do it. Even if you're going to lose a bit of money, you run the event. People might disagree with me on this, but I never ever cancel an event.
Yeah, I think like you said, people wouldn't trust you after that. You'd sort of ruin your reputation as an event manager, host, presenter, or whatever.
And once you run it, next year you're on year 2. And year 2, it's already like, you can say, come back for year 2 of the event. People can see there's social proof. You've run an event before. People aren't, people are always, skeptical of a first year event. But a second year event, you get some good buzz on social media. You get people talking about it. Second year, you'll get more people.
Yeah, cool. Is there one more financial question on expenses? Is there anything people think they need to spend money on that really isn't necessary?
Actually, I'm just going to turn the question around. The thing you should definitely do, which some people don't do, is have a good networking party and buy the drinks. Don't skimp on that. That's the most important part of the event. Arguably the most important part is having a great networking event. I always buy the drinks for networking event. I mean, it depends. Depending on how many people are coming, we might just buy the first few drinks, or if it's a small group, we'll buy drinks all night. But food and drinks in the evening, I think it is essential. That's kind of I'm actually answering your question the other way around. Like that's something people don't do that they should do.
Right. Yeah, and I've
the
got
other way
that plan.
around, no, I'm not sure. I mean,
Right on.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on swag and giveaways. I mean, we haven't talked about sponsors yet, but you should try to get sponsors to maybe pay for that kind of thing. No, I mean, the costs are pretty self-explanatory for events. I think it's not rocket science. Doesn't mean it's easy to do, but it's a simple economics of an event.
Yeah. What about like on-site signage? That's one thing I'm trying to figure out is, the stuff, unless you don't put dates and sponsor logos on it, you could reuse it year after year or at, multiple events in a year. But it seems to me that once you're there and you're seated and the focus is on the presentation, like all that other stuff around it, maybe it disappears, but then at the same time, when you're walking into it and you're seeing it, and if you see a lot of signage and lights or whatever, like it sort of maybe gives that impression that this is a legit event. Look at all this stuff, right? Like what all do you guys put up, and what do you found is actually worth spending the money on?
I think it's definitely have signage because you're creating a whole like kind of world that people are immersing themselves in for a day or two. So they've got to feel like they're part of it. So we have quite a lot of signs. We'll have a lot of standard roll-up standing signs. I mean, one sign outside the venue so people know where they are. At least, one or two signs by the registration desk. We'll have one or two on the main stage, two on the main stage usually. So, they appear in all the photos, which is another important thing, People are taking pictures of the speakers. Your signs are right next to the screen or the speaker. We'll also make another big backdrop, make a photo booth, so get people to take pictures of themselves and post them. So we'll put a bunch of kind of silly things like hats and like fancy dress kind of things. People will take their pictures by the photo booth backdrop. So I wouldn't do it because it's not that expensive to make these signs. I mean, you might only spend $50 a sign or something. Maybe you'll get 6 of them. We do some big banners as well. We can tie the fences outside the event sometimes. I think it's good to do. I think it creates a bit of an atmosphere. I think it's good. But, obviously it all depends how much money you're making. If it's a really small community event and, you're only making a few $100s, then I wouldn't do it.
Okay. So let's talk revenue. The obvious ones are, attendee registration and sponsorship. Do you want to start with those and any tips or feedback on how to maximize those?
Yeah, well, that's it really. It's a chicken and an egg because you're only going to get sponsors if you've got attendees. So it's easy to get sponsors when it's a repeat event, when you can say, look, we had 100 last year, it's going to be 150 this year, and these people came. So sponsors is hard in the beginning. And honestly, I'm not. We should be better at getting sponsors, given how many events we run. Like most of our big sponsors, like Acer, the computer company, they're a global sponsor. That they contacted us. So I'd love to say, I did a great sales process to get Acer, but I was just very fortunate they wanted to come to our events. So I think a few things. First of all, on your website, your event website, and anywhere you can, have become a sponsor, become an exhibitor, have a big button, just as prominent as your registration button, with a link to a Google form where people can fill in some information and then get back to them straight away. So because there'll be sponsors looking at your event. If you're running a first-time event, I'd be very, very cheap on the sponsors. Don't charge them much. Just say, look, buy 2 tickets and you can have an exhibition desk of 2 people. Get a few sponsors there. Make some strict conditions. I mean, don't let sponsors present. I very rarely let sponsors present unless they've got something good to talk about and it's not a pitch. Maybe let them introduce themselves at the beginning or the end, but just let them have a desk. I always give the sponsors a chance to sponsor the networking party, which can help pay for the free drinks I talked about. Then they get to say a few words at the party. But that's it really. I mean, you've got to focus on attendees in the beginning. As you get bigger and bigger, then you can put more of your focus on sponsors and exhibitors. But in the beginning, it's all about attendees.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I like the networking party sponsorship stuff. That's something I'm working on right now. Let's talk the events themselves. Some of the past interviews you've done were, I didn't realize until I was looking at them again this morning, they were actually quite a few years ago. So I want to get to what's changed. But one of the things you mentioned was really talking about making the event memorable and kind of making it a real experience that people want to talk about. What are some of the things you do to make it so that people want to come back and tell their friends?
I mean, I guess it's simple in the sense that, I already mentioned networking party. There's got to be great networking opportunities. You've got to get to meet everyone. You've got to have a good time. But you just got to have amazing content, like the speakers are your product. If you think of an event as a business, the product you're selling is the sessions people get. So there's no two ways about it. If you have great sessions, then everything else can be kind of crap, but people will have it, will be happy about it and they'll recommend it. So it's all about that, It's all about creating your speakers, creating your schedule so you have a good mix of topics, getting the right sessions, right speakers, and that's it, That's what's going to make people enjoy it.
Right on. What I want to add to that, because so this is like in my head, I've been to the social media marketing world, which is just an absolutely bonkers big conference, like 10,000 people attend or something. And so I went to that, and in my head, I'm like, I want to recreate that. It's, massive, 100-foot screens and huge sound systems and bands and everything. I'm like, all right, well, first year event, I'm not going to be able to do that. But I want that vibe, right? I want to recreate that vibe. And so I'm trying to come at this of like, okay, if I were here, if I were going to this event as an attendee, I'd paid my money. What would I want? Like, how would I want that experience to go? And that's, for me, that's sort of how I'm structuring the entire process. It's almost like a checklist, right? Okay, somebody shows up. This is what's going to happen. This happens next, and really script it. Yeah. What do you? Definitely. Is there a particular system you use for check-in, just to kind of keep, or I guess obviously you have the events frame system. You can, and feel free to plug that if it's something you think. Yeah,
we've sold the business now, so I'm not making any money. But events frame is a great system. I highly recommend. Great ticket system, integrates with PayPal, Stripe, Braintree. No, but okay, you need great point. Everyone needs to have a great experience. For us, people turn up. Registration, it's fun. The people behind the registration desk get kind of high energy. You've got to make sure your team and the speakers are milling around. Always have tea and coffee ready. That's the biggest mistake ever. You got to have snacks, tea and coffee, some nice pastries. People come in, they've got that. That you'll get complaints if you don't get that. But people are kind of happy. Like I say, we do the photo booth. We get people to take their pictures taken. Always have music playing. Music playing at registration. We've got a few curated playlists. When people walk into the auditorium, we have playlists. Now, my thing is start the day off with a keynote. Some people wait till the end of the day. Like, kick it off with a bang, and it doesn't have to be one keynote. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 main stage sessions. Like, I've even done a few group things, like, an escape game, different things. But like start day one off with a bang. If you hit it good in the first hour, then people are gonna probably have a good time because they're on a high. If people have a crappy hour, you've got to make it all up over 2 days, and that's tough. So make sure if you've got 2 speakers in a 2-day event, your best speaker should be day one. Everything, let's hit it out of the gate. Don't try to finish strong, like start strong. And the networking event, make sure people have a good time. Make sure all your speakers, tell them it's a requirement to come to the networking event, mingle, talk to speakers. They can't be kind of, aloof and want to hang out by themselves. I don't do anything like a speaker's dinner. I don't do anything where everyone doesn't get to go. I get everyone together and finish off and do your networking event at the end of day one. If you're doing a 2-day event, if it's a 1-day event, end of the day, bang, and do it straight after the closing of the event. You could have a pause, people go home, and an evening party, and it depends on the event. If everyone's coming from out of town, then you can do that. But typically, if a lot of your attendees are local, then hit the networking event early doors, 4 o'clock, whatever. When the session's finished, then everyone comes along.
Yeah, I like that. I think the fewer opportunities you have to lose people. If somebody goes home, I guarantee you half of them wouldn't come back. So the plan is to have it go. It literally ends, and even having that reception, that cocktail hour on site.
It's funny you mentioned social media marketing world. I'm actually a guy got in touch. I'm actually interviewing him on Friday, I think. The guy who founded social media marketing world. It's San Diego, isn't it? San Diego event. It's the guy. It's the guy who's famous for the "Let's Get Social" song. Have you seen that?
No. I haven't.
How have you not seen that? It's a little bit cringeworthy. I'm looking forward to talking to him.
All right.
Just search for "Let's Get Social." It's got like 1 billion views. It's one of the most popular YouTube videos ever. This guy made a song about social media at Social Media Marketing World, and he's the guy who founded the event.
Nice. I'll check that out for sure. Okay. I want to ask you what some of the things you've learned that you wish you knew when you started, any kind of like growing pains, but one that I want to ask directly because this is sort of one of my fears. Hopefully it will be unfounded, but what do you do when you have a speaker lined up and that speaker doesn't show?
Yeah, it happens. I mean, first of all, if they try to pull out, you just got to say, look, get them on the phone. Say, look, there's different reasons. If someone's serious tragedy or something, obviously, what can you do about it? But some people just try and pull out, and I would just guilt them into coming. I've done this before. I've turned it around and said, look, you're causing us a serious issue here. We've sold tickets. People are expecting you to speak. If you pull out, it's going to cause me a real problem. Basically, I will never work with you again. I mean, depending on the situation, I might even say that. And I won't. I mean, if someone pulls out of me without an amazing reason, I would never work with them again, ever. And not only that, is if anyone asked me about them, I would tell them not to work with them. That's kind of how I judge it, if someone pulls out. So it's a serious thing. So, first of all, try to talk them around, because they might want to come around. Obviously, if it's a serious thing, then obviously, but usually it isn't. Honestly, usually it isn't something serious. It's just they decided not to do it. It doesn't happen that often to me. I've always got nowadays 1 or 2 people in reserve.
That was my next question.
Lock up an extra session, or you've got to be. It's not just this, right? You've got to be prepared for unexpected. That's one thing I didn't know at the beginning that I could give you a tip is like, just approach the event from the point of view of everything's going to go wrong. The Wi-Fi is going to go down, the catering's not going to turn up, the coffee won't turn up, your attendees will get the wrong venue, the bar where you're in the networking event will have double booked and they won't do the party. I've had to solve all these things, on the fly, and many more. Just don't chill. Don't assume it's going to go well. Assume, and this is a very negative. I'm sure, like Buddhists or something will say this is the wrong way to approach it, but it's how I approach it. Just be ready for everything to go wrong, because then you're in the frame of mind to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Speakers don't turn up. Just beforehand, think about it. Who else could do an extra session? Could you reorganize some sessions? You could finish a session a bit early if you had to. There's usually a way to reorganize it.
Right on. Yeah, what do they say? Expect the best, but prepare for the worst?
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. Any other growing pains or things that you'd wish you'd known when you first started that you've learned over the past 8 or so years?
I think in the beginning, I wasn't as good at creating the speakers. I like anyone who applied to speak, I'd let them speak. So I kind of felt bad about wanting to let them speak, because I was kind of flattered they were showing interest in wanting to speak at my event. Now, I'm super strict now. Like I told you, I realize that's a product we're selling. We reject most of the speakers nowadays. So that's one thing. I definitely was too casual on letting anyone speak in the beginning.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people reach out, and I haven't researched them yet. But and this is terrible that I have instead of assuming the best, I'm a little dubious. I'm like, okay, what's their agenda? Because clearly, if they're reaching out wanting to speak, they have an agenda. But that's not always a bad thing. But yeah, are there any
as long as their agenda is to make. Yeah, as long as their agenda is to promote themselves, they can be a total sociopath, but it doesn't matter. As long as their agenda is to make everyone think they're amazing, that's good. Because if everyone thinks they're amazing, they had a good time at their session. If their agenda is to promote their product or service, that's the red flag. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Their agenda is just making everyone love them. Perfect. Because if people love them, they're going to love your conference.
That's good. I like that. Well, Dan, is there anything else you'd add for somebody running a first or second time event or just thinking they should run an event that they should know?
I think, obviously, feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. I'm sure you'll put my email or website here. But, if you're thinking of doing an event, just do it because it's easy to postpone it. And it might take you 2 or 3 or 4 years to get the event going, So even if it's a small event the first year, even if you break even or lose a little bit of money, then, the next event, if you give everyone an amazing, amazing time, the second year it'll be a bit better and you get more people. Third year will be a bit better, and then you might have social media marketing world after 4 years, you just get going because time goes quick, you can put it off for a year, but you just think in your own life how quickly time goes, and I can't believe I've been running this business for so long, seems like yesterday. Yeah. So that's the thing. If you're thinking of doing it, just do it because there's no point putting it off for another year because there'll never be a good time to do it. It's always going to be some hard work.
Right on. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thanks.
There are a couple of key takeaways for me. First, don't be afraid to negotiate. The worst thing a venue, speaker, or hotel can say is no. But if you don't ask, you might be overpaying or not getting the perks you want. It's harder as a first-year event, but as you build your credibility and audience size, it's easier to bring costs down with proof that you'll deliver an audience. The second is this: make the event memorable and valuable. Too many events I've been to are full of hype, but not much substance. Deliver the value and give people information they can really use, and you're most of the way there. A good networking party and social atmosphere that helps people connect and get to know each other and the speakers will really make it memorable, shareable, and more likely that they'll come back year after year. So, what was my interest in learning all of this? I've launched Peak Content Summit, a content marketing strategy conference taking place in Asheville, North Carolina in March 2020. If you're a content creator, brand manager, PR person, marketer, or publisher that wants to grow your content revenue and influence, this is the conference for you. Check out the full speaker list, curriculum, and more at peakcontentsummit.com. That's peakcontentsummit.com, and I'll see you in March. Thanks for tuning in. Here's hoping you're making your next event great. Until next time, keep building.